think this might have to be a bit intimate.
Okay.
Hello everyone and welcome to Gaming FTL. My name is Josh and I'm here with Tom, the creator of Gunpoint, and also he is here to show Heat Signature.
Yeah.
So, would you go into a bit of detail about kind of the setup for the story and mechanics of Heat Signature?
So it's a space stealth game about sneaking up to big spaceships, docking with them, and then going inside. So you're in a tiny little defenseless ship, and the only way you can actually get anything done is to sneak up to the airlock of another ship and literally walk inside their corridors and hide from their crew, steal their stuff, hijack their ship, sabotage it, and stuff like that.
You do most of the things that you can do with a spaceship actually as a player character. What made you decide like the difference between those two states?
I think I just really wanted to have a spaceship game that sort of stressed that there are people inside, that they're not just kind of these abstract metal things that just destroy each other. That it's about, you know, people are in some cases living aboard these ships and they are sort of an integral part of how the ships work, and so it's getting to see that extra kind of insight into what's going on inside and how it affects what's going on outside.
Cool. So what kind of people will be inside these ships eventually?
Armed guards. And so right now it's armed guards and people actually manning certain turrets, and the actual captain who's in the captain's seat controlling the whole thing. And any one of those you can beat them up and take their position and do what they're doing. That's pretty much going to be it, I think, except that the people who are manning those stations will also be able to, if you make too much noise, get alerted and come after you as well. So the number of actual enemies you're dealing with will be variable depending on how much noise you make. In terms of, like, it's not going to be a game where you are talking to the people aboard the ships usually. It's going to be the idea that there are places where people live is kind of part of the context and the setting. So you'll see their, you know, living quarters and their mess hall and that kind of stuff, and you'll get the sense that they do live here, but you are an intruder aboard, so none of them are going to be nice to you. It's going to be a serious thing if they see you.
And all of these spaceships are actually made up of little modules.
Yeah.
What made you think of doing that instead of just, you know, this spaceship is this kind and this one's a Cobra or whatever?
Yeah, so a key thing throughout all of Heat Signature was I wanted it to be randomly generated and kind of infinite. So it's already infinite. In fact, the galaxy, you can just go as far as you like in any direction. It'll never run out of stuff.
Very cool.
And I want it to be very replayable and something you can play for a long time. And so for that, it made more sense to have proper random generation. And I wanted the differences in ships to be really interesting. And as much as possible, I didn't want to sort of divide them into classifications or say, here are the 9 types of ships there can be or anything like that. As much as possible, I wanted the code to be generating stuff that even I couldn't predict, and that could kind of stray outside the parameters that I might have for that kind of stuff. And so for that, I wanted it to be kind of, I guess, as granular as possible. Like the pieces it's made of have to be as small and generic as possible in order to create a larger array of possibilities. And I should definitely give credit to Captain Forever, which is a browser-based game where you can build ships out of square blocks. And it wasn't, I didn't consciously decide to think, oh, I'll do it the same way as Captain Forever, but I had played Captain Forever and I love it, and I'm sure that is what, you know, forged the pathways in my brain that made me think, oh, that can work. Basically, once you've seen a game do something well, it becomes a way you can do it if you want. Yeah. And I'm always trying to be very conscious of, like, I never do something the way it's normally done unless I have a specific reason why it needs to be that way. And so my reason they need to be built out of simple square blocks is so that I can have any kind of shape and any kind of structure and very different configurations.
So where did your initial interest in procedural generation come from? Because obviously Gunpoint was it was this level to the next level and they were always the same. Yeah,
weirdly, probably from the same game that also inspired Gunpoint, which is Spelunky. Because I started making a game only because Spelunky was so brilliant, and it was made in Game Maker, which seemed very approachable and easy to learn, and it is very easy to learn. So that inspired me to make games, and because it was my first game for Gunpoint, I thought procedural generation would just be too hard, I just wouldn't be able to do it. So it's always something I knew was really important and really cool. And the only reason I didn't do it with Gunpoint was just that I didn't have the confidence to do it. As it turned out, and Gunpoint has 20 missions, and those took so long to design and tweak and finish that probably it would have been quicker to make procedural generation. I think that's probably an easier task than making 20 levels. And the other thing is that Gunpoint went down really well, it's very well received. The complaint that always comes up is that it's too short, or it depends on the person's disposition, whether they say it's too short or I wanted more, which is a similar thing. And so procedural generation, the thing is that people who thought it was too short didn't think it was 5 levels too short. They wanted 100 levels, and it took me 3 years to make 20. So it wasn't a problem I could solve by just putting in more work or brute forcing it. It was going to have to be like the only 2 lengths of game I can make are short or infinite.
So you couldn't make Gunpoint procedural now?
I think it's possible. I'm quite interested in procedural puzzle generation, but I probably wouldn't go back and do it for Gunpoint specifically, just because I'd rather base a whole new game around that kind of stuff if I was going to do it. And actually the ships in Heat Signature are going to have more kind of puzzly elements to them than they currently do. Right now they're all just empty, well, not empty corridors, but all the corridors are open, there's no doors or anything, nothing stopping you from going where you want. I would like for there to be doors that you can seal from the central computer, some of which will be sealed when you board, and so your objective might be behind a locked door and you have to figure out a way to get to the computer to hack it. Various ships might have sort of security locks on their airlocks, which means you can't dock until you get a key card from another ship. So there'll be a certain amount of puzzle logic to that, but it will still be randomly generated, so it'll be it won't be sort of like genius puzzles where you have a moment of revelation and think, oh my god, this is amazing, I see the solution now, because they won't be designed by a human, they will be randomly generated, and that will mean there'll be some very easy ones, but it'll also mean they'll be different all the time, and there may be some where it's outright impossible to do it the way you'd like to, and I just want to make the game flexible enough that there's always a way to do something else, there's always a way to kind of get around any hard obstacle like that.
You talked for so long that I forgot what I was going to ask you. But no, that's good. That's brilliant. No, on the infinite scale of things, you're kind of bringing that into the mission structure. What directions are you going to go with that?
So right now, the missions, you just get them from a computer on board a ship. You sort of contact your home base and they give you a new theft mission or a new assassination mission. And that just repeats infinitely. And that's not too far from what I actually want to do. What I want to do is have a galactic map with space stations dotted all over it, each of which will belong to a faction, and each faction will have a sort of like a cluster of them that forms their territory, and they will be hiring you to go out and perform missions that will in some way expand their territory by taking space stations over, or defend their territory from the invaders, and that will be to do with, it'll still be to do with spaceships. It will be to do with stuff like intercepting a cargo ship, hijacking it and stealing the cargo to bring it to your faction instead of theirs, or maybe a faction leader is flying out to set up a new space station. You might have to intercept that ship and take him out, or maybe your faction has like a secret agent aboard some ship and he needs rescuing, so you have to go and get him and bring him back, so that kind of thing.
Awesome. So finally, where do you see procedural generation going in the near future? Obviously, something as far-reaching as No Man's Sky is going to be upon us at some point. What other things do you think people could do with it?
I think we'll start seeing it more treated more seriously as like a sort of school of game design, because a lot of the procedural generation's in a lot of things, and it's sometimes people associate it with stuff like Diablo, where it randomly generates the loot. And I think that's a very, very, very small glimpse of what random generation can really do. But what's required in order to make it more exciting and more kind of richer for game development is, I don't think it's really a technology problem at the moment. I think there are loads of really interesting things you can do with procedural generation at the kind of cutting edge of research and technology in terms of like simulating human behavior and all kinds of complex stuff like that. But I think much bigger problem to solve is how do you generate things that will be fun to play with, and it's kind of largely a design problem rather than a maths problem, which is why I feel I don't get completely daunted by it and give up, because I will never be as smart as the people who spent years researching this stuff, but it's possible to have a good sense of what makes a game fun and a very loose grasp of maths, and then combine those two into a system that will make really fun games. And I think Spelunky is kind of, again, the reference point for the random generation that is not too complicated. And I sort of figured out how it worked before I knew how it worked. And then Derek Hughes talked about how it works, and it is pretty simple. Just assembles it from these template blocks and then randomly varies those a little bit. And yet the game is kind of endlessly fun. I've played it thousands and thousands of times. And I think it's a great illustration of how design makes randomization into something that's really important and valuable.
It's the fun bit.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, talking about heat signature and everything else. Thank you very much. We hope to see heat signature. Do you know platforms, times?
Definitely be on Windows, hopefully Mac and Linux. Don't know when.
Awesome. Thank you very much, and stay tuned to Gaming FTL for more Eurogamer coverage. Goodbye.